It's the Hill and Ponton podcast. I'm here, Carol Ponton. I'm here today again with Kerry Baker. How you doing, Kerry?
Good. How are you, Carol?
I am great, great. Ready to answer some questions. We want everybody to know that in the middle of the program, there are two studies that came out that I think are really important, and we're going to share those with you. That one was done by the military. The other was done of the military, all the servicemen. And it shows problems that come from military service, and we want to share those with you. But first, we're going to get started with the questions. What's our first question, Nate? LSGS assigned CNP. Therapist wrote a letter for diagnosis related to military. Should I give the therapy session notes to the VA or the CNP, or is the letter sufficient? I'd give it to everybody, wouldn't you? Diagnosed with major depressive and anxiety. I think you should give it to everybody. But when you go in for a CMP, don't hand them a ton. Hand them what you really want them to see. Otherwise, they may not even read it. Is an injury to the finger the same thing as an injury to the hand, or is the finger one injury claim and the hand another? Carrie?
It depends.
Yeah. I'll give you all the easy ones.
Yeah, you can have there's diagnostic codes for the hand, just like there is for the foot, and there's diagnostic codes for the fingers, just like there is the toes. So it depends on what's going on. If your only injury to the hand is an injury to the finger, well, then you have an injury to the finger.
Right.
You can have a hand injury and a finger injury. Um, you just need to be specific about what the residual is. Maybe your whole hand hurts, but it's caused from a single finger injury. I mean, you could probably list out 100 different scenarios, but just give them all of the info about the injury and the current symptoms, and hopefully that should get you down the right path.
Right. One, I guess there's three questions. Based on your comments on previous episodes, I filed for unemployability while at 78% with several pending. I'm recently up to 91%, scheduled with two differed but very likely. Should I withdraw a TDIU request and wait? I never withdraw the TDIU request.
No, no,
As they're asking me,
definitely not. No, not with a high rating like that.
Right. As they're asking me for self-employed statement explains my hours worked, income, missed days due to disability. I'm self-employed to create my own sheltered employment and barely earn poverty. Next would be level. Anyway, as of now, one man home service company just trying to survive. They're currently reviewing headaches, migraines, which they just tagged as secondary to tinnitus, and still evaluating a lump back pay. No, I definitely continue with the TDIU issue that was noted many times in service, and what I believe is Q from 2004 claim denial, which their x-ray shows was broken back and they noted in service medical records, but never mentioned to me, just denied. Okay, there seems to be a few questions. The one about TDIU, don't withdraw. It's like Kerry said, you already have a really high rating, but they're not going to give you TDIU until you've explained what your earnings are. Like you said, if you have sheltered, remember, if you are working for yourself, you need to show them what the net income is after you deduct gas if you're driving or whatever it else, office and things like that. Um, Kerry, are you sure what he's asking for the rest of it? I'm not sure about that.
I'm not 100% certain. You say something that appears like it's a CUE. Be careful there. CUEs are tough,
Yeah,
and you really got to know why they denied what they denied, what the record says. You know, if you said X-ray showed a broken back. If you had a broken back in service, uh, and and you have a broken back now, and they denied it, well, that could be a CUE. It sounds like one, but it's never that easy on its face.
no, no.
If you had a broken back in service, what's the reason for the denial? If the X-ray showed a broken back and you had an injury in service that showed no broken back, well, where'd the broken back come from? Uh, if X-rays were done within a year of service that showed arthritis, that's a possible route for a CUE there. Um, but without knowing more about the claim, as far as CUE goes, it's impossible to answer that. It could be, it might not be. Um, that's yeah. I don't know how else to answer that without knowing.
No, and that's one of the problems we have is we don't have all the facts, but the way that we would work it up, the first thing is, are you service connected for your back? If you're
Mhm.
not, you should go ahead and get service connected for your
Right.
back and then determine how far back you can go. At that point, you would see why they granted you service connection for your back now and looking at the denial, why they didn't back then, and maybe
Yeah.
figure out exactly where you are.
And with a 91% disability rate, that's your combined rate. One, gotta make sure that's accurate. All right.
Yeah.
That means you're not too far from 100%. It sounds like you're pretty close, but it could be farther than you think, depending on what's still pending to be rated. And the thing with a TDIU claim is, if they can award a scheduler 100%, then they'll do that. Then, that would kind of moot out your TDIU claim unless they awarded the 100% from a later date than the TDIU claim has been pending. And they do this all
All
the
the time.
time.
And they
That
say TDIU is moot,
is moot.
and it's
And
not moot.
yeah, so if your claim has been pending for 5 years, for example, and they rated you 100% scheduler from last month, for example,
Yes.
on a brand new rating decision, oh, TDIU is moot. No, it's not. If it's been pending for 5 years, then they need to make a decision on the TDIU prior to the time you were a scheduler 100%. If they take the 100% back to 5 years, the whole time the TDIU has been pending, then it's moot.
But
Uh,
we don't see that, do we?
No, no, Raiders think that anytime you're 100%, it moots out TDIU from the entire history of the claim, and that is just not true. And almost any DRO will end up, potentially changing that.
One of the things I know that we do is, and I remember when my husband was in the military, Westpac Civ, you had no idea what he's talking about because everything is abbreviated. So TDIU, for those of you who are new, is total disability due to unemployability. And it means if you have a service-connected problem that keeps you from working and you're not working, you're entitled to unemployability. Now, you also have to meet a rating. You have to either have one rating for 60% or combined ratings for 70, one of which is at least 40. So that's what TDIU means. And I also want to talk about DTA, duty to assist. Whenever I file a lot of duty to assist appeals, in that, say, I asked for service connection for migraines due to tinnitus for my veteran, and I got a decision that said, at no time in the service did your veteran have migraines. They didn't evaluate what my client was claiming, and that's a duty to assist error. So I file a higher level review and I get a duty to assist, a DTA decision. That means that now they're going to go back and evaluate, hopefully, the claim that the veteran actually filed. So that's what you get with the duty to assist. It doesn't mean you've won, you've lost. It just means they're going to reevaluate the claim. And the other thing veterans really sometimes don't understand is when you get a remand from the board. A remand from the board sends the case back to the regional office to redo whatever the issue is that they say, whether they want another evaluation or they will say specifically what they want. It doesn't mean you won or you lost. It just means they are reevaluating this issue before a decision can be made. So during this, Kerry, sometimes I really want to just explain what some of these terms are because I see so often people get lost in, like, moot. Moot
Hmm.
means it doesn't matter. Well, it
Right.
does matter.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, absolutely.
Why does VA not use Title 10 orders for Reserve or National Guard members to prove different duty periods? I was overseas, came home, placed on different orders, and got BCD. Here we go. Okay. Kerry, what is a BCD and what are Title 10 orders?
Now, okay, I don't. My version of BCD, and I don't know if this is what he's saying, so I don't want to insult anybody by accident. When I hear BCD, to me, it's always been bad conduct discharge. I don't know if that's what he's saying he
Wow.
got. Title 10 orders, VA does use Title 10 orders. Um, if they have them, if they can, if they can get a copy. It doesn't mean they always do in some certain circumstances. But if there are Title 10 orders available and in the record showing that you had federal service rather than state service, well, VA will use that, or at least they're supposed to. Uh, so if you have it in your case and they didn't use it in your case, then that could be an isolated problem to your case. But I'm not, I don't want to read into the BCD if that's not what he's talking about.
Right.
Now, you know what? Something just hit me. So if I'm correct in that BCD is bad conduct discharge, and your BCD was from state service, but you had federal service, all right? I think I see where that might be going. Is the federal service under Title 10 still good for VA benefits, even though the state service you got a BCD on? If I'm interpreting that correctly, and I'll be honest, I'm not sure the answer to that, because if this were active duty, the VA would have to consider each period of active duty separately. And if one period's honorable and another period's not, well, then in that situation, they have to look at the honorable period and any disabilities that arise from that honorable period as potentially service connectable. Anything arising from the bad paper service would not be service connectable. How that plays into National Guard service, I'm not exactly sure.
Right.
I don't know that I've seen a case, to be honest, where there was a bad discharge and it was separate duty between state and federal, and whether that counted as one. Because you said at the end, the time was totaled together. Maybe
Right.
it shouldn't have been. That's actually a pretty interesting scenario if that's what you're talking about. Don't know that I've ever argued one of those, to be honest, Carol. Uh,
I just no, I've definitely never seen this before, but the general advice we give people, remember, if you've been overseas and maybe what happened to you over there, you developed PTSD, something happened, caused you to end up with a bad conduct discharge. Remember, if we can, the VA is really strange. If we can show, they call it insane, but it's defined as if you act outside your normal, the way that you would normally act,
right.
then you can get benefits anyway. So you just have to show that. So many times we've gotten our psychiatrists to evaluate you as to what happened and how this was different from your norm because of what you had been exposed to and what happened to you over there. So I don't really know about this case, but I know that I would encourage you, if that's what happened to you, to go that route and then get the whole thing. Then you can still get benefits no matter what they said. Currently rated 100% permanent and total TDIU under unemployability, was recently awarded Social Security disability after 3 years in a judge decision. The Hill and Ponton disability calculator for 2023 has me at 92% rounded down to 90, with 70 general anxiety, major depressive disorder, 40% right upper extremity, 30% left upper extremity, cervical spinal stenosis, tinnitus, fusion scar. Is there a risk to submit a higher level against previously denied migraine and erectile dysfunction? I wouldn't think so. Would you, Kerry?
I wouldn't think so. If you say previously denied claim for migraines and headaches,
So if he was
or migraine
granted the
headaches and
TDIU under these
yeah,
other things, and these
yeah,
issues are different.
yeah, are we talking service connection that was denied or an increased rating that was denied? If you're if you're already unemployable, getting 100%, uh, and you're fighting a higher rating for migraines, well, yeah, that could put you at risk if the rating that you currently have for migraines is considered part of the TDIU. and they give you an exam and it looks like the migraines got better. Now, having said that, that's rare. It should not happen that way. If you're trying to get service connection for the migraines, then and well, this would apply either one, increase rating or service, as long as nothing bad happens to the case. If they grant an increase or if they grant service connection, is it going to benefit you? It's not going to increase your rating if your TDIU is based on multiple disabilities, okay? Because it would still be based on multiple disabilities. So there's no avenue there for SMCS unless you had a single, unless the TDIU was from a single disability, which it could
Right.
be. Yeah.
But Kerry, he said he had a 70% for general anxiety and major depressive disorder. So I would try to get him the 100% under that alone.
Yeah.
The erectile dysfunction is an SMCK, and that, of
Right.
course, wouldn't have anything to do with the others. So,
Yeah. Yeah. So just, determine, in my opinion, determine if it's going to benefit you. And if it's not, yeah, I would be cautious. And like Carol said, if you could get it under, if you get TDIU, or if TDIU is already awarded just for the mental health, and if they grant the migraines, and is that going to put you into the SMCS category? Well, then it would benefit you. Uh, but yeah, you're going to have to answer some of these questions. Kind of, if it's not going to benefit you, I'd leave it alone. If it is going to benefit you,
well,
then
always, right.
yeah. Hmm.
I'm sorry, Nate, and there was a fourth part. Does it make sense to strategize 100% scheduler rating goal as perhaps someday? No. Okay. So they're saying, should you try to get 100% scheduler in case the VA wants to phase out unemployability as they've been threatening to do for years? No, I don't think so.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, you could end up in some hot water there if you all it takes is a bad examination for somebody to propose to reduce. If they try to phase out TDIU and you're already getting it, you know,
Yeah.
I cannot see it not being grandfathered in.
Right.
But moreover, I don't see it being phased out. I don't think there's political will to take that kind of drastic cut against veterans. I know a lot of people in VA in some places in VA would like to see that.
And they've wanted to do it for
Yeah,
years. They've been arguing about it, but
I
it's
just,
never happened.
I don't think it's going to happen. If it does, I think we'll have worse problems at that point than VA. I just think that the paradigm's going to have to shift
Yeah.
considerably on the Hill for somebody to have the will to slash veterans benefits that much.
Right.
I wouldn't worry about it.
I was NG Title 32, returned from. Okay, Carrie, you read this.
I think it's National Guard. I was
Ah,
National Guard Title 32, returned from OIF deployment, Title 10 in February 2010, and continued my National Guard service. I was diagnosed with GERD by VA in November 2010. Does this qualify for the 12-month window of service connection? I would have to look in the regs to be 100% sure, but I don't think, just going off memory, I don't think that GERD is on the list of chronic disabilities if diagnosed within a year. That's the 12-month window. What you're talking about there, there's a presumption of service connection for chronic disabilities. The definition of chronic disabilities is a limited list at 3.309A in Title 38 of Part 3 of the regulation. It's also, I think, at 1101 or 1109, somewhere in there in the statute. Um, same list, both places. I don't think GERD is on that list. There are some ulcer diseases that do qualify. But now, having said that, you got out of service. So let's just
right.
say the 12-month does not apply. Okay, let's just assume that. That does not mean you can't get service connection when you were officially diagnosed. What, within what, 8, 9 months after
Right.
service, after your active duty. Um, I would first, if you haven't claimed it, uh, I would claim it, and I would explain that your symptoms began during service. If they did, I'm assuming they probably did, and since it's that close, and if once the facts all come out and it's determined that, yeah, your symptoms began while on active duty, well, then you can get service connection just as if it would have been on the 12-month list.
Right. So that's a better way, and you're not doing presumptive, but it's a better way to prove that case.
Mhm.
I will be filing a presumptive claim for prostate cancer. Had surgery and cancer has been removed. Will also be filing for EDD, inguinal hernia, and urinary incontinence. Do I file for these as residual, secondary? Do I file them all at the same time and list them on the 526 as residual, secondary, or do I file prostate cancer first, wait for that to get adjudicated and service connected, and then file residuals? Please, please, the one thing we say here is don't wait to file anything, and file everything that you know of you have now. Please don't wait to file. You're only hurting yourself. And you can say it's a complication of, a residual of, due to, whatever you want to do to show that it's because of the prostate cancer. But please file them all and file them right away.
I could not agree more.
If I had an intent to file for new claims, but submitted a supplemental claim 0995 for a previously denied claim and a claim underrated, will it affect my possible effective date for the new claims? Okay, so you submitted an intent to file a new claim, and I'm assuming.
If I'm reading that right, the, if all of that is, we're talking separate issues. You file a new claim, an intent to file for a new claim for issues that are not part of the supplemental claim. I think that's how I'm reading that, Carol. Uh,
Right.
then no, it would not affect the effective date of the new claim. If
Right,
they're
I
the
agree.
same, uh, if they're the same, then if you're filing the supplemental claim within a year, then you don't need to file an intent to file for the new
What
claims.
he says for new claims, so I think you're right the
Yeah.
first time, Kerry. Have thoracic and lumbar spine strain with lumbar degenerative joint disease, 40% since 2016. After CMP exam, the VA added IVDS to rating and changed the code to 5243 and made it effective this year. Should the effective date be challenged at the higher level review? No, it doesn't affect you. Good day. I'm curious to know what the VA requires to get a lower back rating above 40%. I've done everything but had surgery, which doctors have told me it wouldn't make any difference.
You're not going to like my answer to this one. All right, so everyone that's got 40% on a back rating, you should listen. Okay, and this is just my opinion, so you don't have to go for it. You can tell me I'm crazy if you want. The highest rating for a back in the schedule is 60% under 5243. It used to be 5293 under the old code. So that's intervertebral disc syndrome. Do not expect to get 60%. All right.
How many times have you seen a 60% rating?
Since they changed the rating schedule from 5293 to 5243, a couple times, maybe.
I've never seen it. I've
Um,
seen 50%, maybe 3 times in 30
yeah,
years, never 60.
yeah. So used to, if you had, neurological deficits appropriately from the site of the disease disc, I'm trying to remember what the language was 20 some years ago. Um, then you could be rated 60% for a spine, but you did not get rated for the residuals. Like you didn't get separate ratings for lumbar radiculopathy if you had a lumbar spine problem. It was easier to get the 60%, okay, but you wouldn't get a separate rating for residuals. Once they changed the rating schedule and allowed for separate ratings for residuals, and they changed the criteria for the back itself, um, they they when they made the 60% criteria, it was already out of date for the medical world. Okay, and that 60% criteria was that you had to be ordered to bed rest for
Yes.
6 weeks during the course of a year. It could be cumulative, could be separate periods of time, but it had to be ordered by a doctor. This is still the way it is. Okay. It has to be ordered by a doctor for the doctor to tell you, you go lay down in bed and you stay there for 6 weeks. Now, this can happen 1 week at a time for 6 times throughout the year, 2 weeks at a time for 3 times throughout the year, once for 6 weeks solid. But here's the problem with that: doctors do not prescribe bed rest for back problems. That practice went out the door decades ago.
Yeah.
It's potentially malpractice for a
Yes.
doctor to do that, because they know now that movement is far better for your back than laying still, even though you might not be able to move. And that's another problem with the regulation. If you're in such pain you just can't move, that doesn't get you the 60%
Yeah.
because the doctor didn't prescribe it. And a doctor's not going to prescribe it. At least not that I've seen. And
No.
all the orthopedic docs I've spoken to said, no, that we don't do that anymore. Uh, uh, that get us sued. It makes someone's back worse.
Yes.
Um, so reaching that level from the rating schedule perspective, I think is impossible. Okay. And so if you're rated at 40% for a back, I would leave it alone because there's only one place that I can see in a practical world, even though
You're
VA
going
is
to go
not really
down.
practical, and that's going down. Because
Right.
you only need one examination that showed that you had enough range of motion that didn't support the 40%, because the 40% now is basically just on range of motion. And it just takes a good day that you can bend over further, and bam, you're facing a proposal to reduce. Instead, don't argue with the 40%. If you've got 40%, odds are you've got residuals.
Right.
If your back's that bad, you probably have radiculopathy in one or both legs, or if it's a neck problem, in one or both arms. Those are your issues you want to fight, because you could end up collectively with more than 60%. If you had 40 for the spine and you had, say, 20 for each leg, you throw in the bilateral factor, that's 36. 20 for each leg is 36. The bilateral factor puts that to 39.6, which comes out to 40%. That's then combined with the other 40% that you have. All right, so you end up better off technically, or you could, than if you had a single 60% in some cases, depending on the residuals. But I would just not fight a 40% back rating, simply because it's and there are always exceptions. If somebody's got ankylosis,
And
um,
ankylosis means that it doesn't move.
right.
Okay. And I've gotten those, but I mean the back doesn't move. They can't move at all.
Yeah.
They're frozen in place. But Kerry brought up what's really important for you to understand is sometimes the VA ratings don't give you what you really should get, like for a back, through the back. They give it through other problems the back causes, like the pain that goes down your legs, or maybe the legs give way and you fall, or maybe you have drop foot where you can't pick up your foot and it drags when you walk. Those are really great ratings to add to your back. And those are the things you should be working on, not an increased rating for your back. Some people end up with urinary problems because of their back. Maybe the nerve has been damaged and they have to go to the bathroom, or they're incontinent. Think about how that has affected you. Maybe you can't have sex, so you should have erectile dysfunction. So instead of beating on the same drum, think about what else is out there, because the VA has set this up in a very their own manner, and you need to play the game. Okay.
Yeah. So a little short backstory there. VA used to have on the policy staff an epidemiologist, and not a very high ranking epidemiologist at that.
You
Um,
mean not good?
and and I'm not going to list any names here. I'm going to get sued. But this person, this person wrote the rating schedule. This was the only for a long time. This particular person wrote a good chunk of the rating schedule, and she's the one that wrote this back thing. She had no business doing it. Uh, and that's, they do it in a completely different manner now. They get a lot of involvement now, maybe too much, from universities and doctors all over the place to try to come together and help create a better better rating schedule. I'm not so sure that always works either. But when they did this back thing, it should not have been done the way it was done, and it should have been changed by now. There was a point I tried to get medical opinions collectively for not any specific case, just opinion saying we don't prescribe bed rest.
Right.
It doesn't happen. It's illegal for us to do it, or however they could justify it. To say that you created a rating schedule that's impossible to meet the criteria for.
Right.
Problem there is the court doesn't have, as Carol can tell you, the court doesn't have jurisdiction to look at the rating schedule. So
Right.
arguing that is exceptionally difficult. And I still think it's a good argument, but what's the end game to it?
Right.
So anyway, that's my little backstory for uh, spine problems.
I'm 100% permanent total. Can I get additional payment if I need help living in my own house or an assisted living facility? What if I have over the income threshold? Is there any assistance available? There's lots of assistance available through the VA, both through the medical part and through the benefits part. You can have, if you're talking about having your house changed because you need a ramp or you need other things, both sides have that. Although I find that the health side of the VA is often more is quicker to help you than sometimes the benefits side. Aid and attendance is what you want to file if because of your service connected problems you can't do the activities of daily living that keep you healthy and safe. Okay, they're not talking about cutting your yard. They're talking about making sure you bathe and are clean, that you are able to get food, that if you can't, can you prepare it or do you leave the stove on and burn things? Do you mix your medication up? Do you forget to take your medicine? If you have trouble with these things because of a service connected problem, you need to file for aid and attendance. If you have problems of a higher level, like say you have diabetes and you need to take insulin shots, but you have Parkinson's and the trimmers don't allow you to give you those shots, that's aid and attendance of an even higher level. So yes, there's lots out there for you. Kerry, you want to jump in on that or add?
Yeah. So the income threshold part, if I'm understanding the question right, I might not be. I don't think that's something you should have to worry about.
No.
Obviously, for any of the compensation benefits, like Carol was talking about, the aid and attendance, income threshold is not an issue because we're dealing with compensation, not pension, right? And so you don't have to worry about that. Now, if you need the healthcare side to come in and do home health care, uh, which is different than filing for A&A. Okay, one's a benefit through compensation, the other one's a benefit through the VHA, Veterans Health Administration. They can do both. Okay, you could be entitled to the aid and attendance through compensation and need somebody from the healthcare side to come in for daily home health care 3 times a week, whatever it may be. There's no income threshold for that because you're 100%. So that shouldn't be a factor either.
And Kerry, I've been fighting for I find that we're still fighting for aid and attendance through the benefits when the VA under the health side has already given my
Yeah,
veterans 3 days a week of
yeah,
help or more than that. So apply to both of them. Go to the nearest health facility, the VA health, and tell them, or they'll probably have your records and tell them what you need.
yeah. I do think the irony of VBA denying A&A when VHA is already providing it. Uh,
Yeah, it is ironic. Good morning from California. I don't think sleep apnea falls under the PACT Act, but would sleep apnea be secondary to a condition, one of the PACT Act's presumptive conditions, and how would you claim that? I don't know of one offhand. Do you, Kerry?
it's not under the PACT Act. That's right, as far
Right.
as the presumption goes. I mean, there are a lot of presumptions in the PACT Act. Yeah, I suppose if you can show that you have any doesn't have to be a PACT Act presumption, any service connected disability that's causing or contributing to or making worse sleep apnea, then you can file a claim for that. You would simply do it on, if you've never done it before, you would do it on a 526. If you have done it before and it's been denied, you would do it on an 0995. You would claim the sleep apnea secondary to whatever it is that you feel is causing it. Um,
And if you Google the things that cause that, that might help you. Like sometimes tinnitus, if you're service connected for that, that can cause it.
yeah.
Sometimes there are other things. So I think I would Google the things that cause sleep apnea and look to see what you have that may be or should be service connected rather than worry about presumptive.
Yeah, and I'd say too, if it's a lot of the PACT Act dealt with, we have the Vietnam side and the herbicides, but I mean the meat of the PACT Act was Gulf War, burn pits, Iraq, Afghanistan, all
Right.
that, and you're talking about a lot of respiratory problems that are now linked to service in the Gulf, and I'm using the Gulf kind of broadly. So a lot of respiratory problems can lead to sleep apnea, even though there's a few thousand contract VA examiners that think only one thing on the planet's ever caused it. Uh, don't listen to that.
And we're
Uh,
not sure what that is.
yeah, I don't think they know either. So you
And
might
remember,
have, yeah. So it might be a challenge getting it, but no, it can be done.
remember when we're talking about respiratory problems, if you have a respiratory problem, you only get paid for the rating that's the highest. So I have had lots of veterans who had, say, 30% for asthma, and then they get sleep apnea. Well, they're only going to get the 50% for sleep apnea. They're not going to get a combined of those two ratings. So if you have a rating over 50% already for a respiratory problem, don't waste your time with sleep apnea. I can't see it helping. Can you?
Not in most circumstances. There is a caveat to that regulation that says when there are multiple disabilities that you can't rate separately because of pyramiding, that VA is to take the one that's the most disabling. And if there's a bit of discretion on the VA side here, I'll just use if. I think the word is may in the reg. If the more than one condition supports a higher rating, you take the worst one and you bump it up one level. So when there's asthma and COPD, but only if they're both service, well, that would be rated separately. It's sleep apnea is a better example. Sleep apnea and asthma, in that criteria, the hypothetical that Carol gave, the 30 and the 50, most of the time you're just going to get the 50.
Right.
But there are cases you can argue that you should get the 60 under the asthma. Asthma goes from 30 to 60. Because it's the worst, and the combined effect of it means VA should apply that part of the reg and elevate the worst one up one level. Well, elevating asthma up one level would get you to 60. Elevating sleep apnea up one level, does it get you to 80, I think, or something
Yeah,
like that?
80 is the next.
So there's an argument there, but
There is, but it's a hard argument.
yeah.
And sometimes veterans get upset with me because, particularly with hearing, they really want to get a hearing rating. And hearing is one of the hardest things to get a reasonable rating for. The VA has just set you up for it. And I try to tell them, don't waste your time on something that's not going to really help you when you have so many other things that you need to pursue. You only have so much energy, you only have so much money to get opinions and things like that. And so I always try to say, think about what is this going to do for you as opposed to something else. So you and I both do that. Kerry, you are really an enigma. So we've got Baker up there, and that's made up of, what is made up of there, Kerry?
With that,
That you're in behind you, the Baker.
oh, the sign behind me.
Yeah. What is that made up of?
That's my last name spelled out in gun parts.
In gun what?
Gun parts.
Gun parts. And then
Yeah,
he has the teddy bear there.
and
So I'm and then he's got the fishing rod. I can see the fishing rod, but the teddy bear. Kerry,
yeah.
you're the
Somebody, a client gave me no, I take that back. My girlfriend gave me the teddy bear, and
trying to have a new vision.
I'm just trying not to be in the doghouse.
Okay.
But yeah,
Right.
the sign above the door, if you look closely,
That's
it's
Baker.
parts.
That's you.
Baker.
Yeah.
So
okay, Kerry wanted to say something today about the widow's problem that we continue to see that all of you need to be aware of.
All right. Thanks for letting me share this, Carol. I really appreciate it. So, if you were listening last week, you heard me rant a little bit about what's going on at the pension management centers with, surviving spouse cases. Um, and first and foremost, I'd say if you're a surviving spouse and you've been denied benefits, almost as a whole, I want to see that case. I'm just being a little selfish here, uh, because I think there's a good chance the VA got it wrong. Um, Obviously that's not true in every case, but and one of those problems, one out of many that I think are at the PMC, um, are surviving spouses of retirees, right,
Yes,
or military retirees who put 20 years or more, who's eligible for a military retirement pay, put it that way. Usually that's longevity, 20 years or more in active duty, or something similar in the reserves, to the point where you're entitled to retired pay at the retirement age. When a live veteran files a claim, and let's say a veteran who's got 20 years in files a claim for, you name it, cancer, right, and they get granted 100%, and that claim goes back a year, they would be entitled to $35,000-$40,000 back pay if they weren't getting any other benefits. Just in that particular example, they're going to withhold, let's call it $40,000. They're going to withhold that $40,000 in the back pay, and then they're going to send a message to DFAS, Defense Finance and Accounting, to verify what that veteran is receiving in retired pay. And then DFAS is going to send back a spreadsheet to VA that verifies that amount, and VA is going to then release those funds that they withheld to that veteran. Now, it's sort of an exercise in futility when you're
sure.
talking about somebody at 100%,
And delay.
because they're going to be due both benefits, every
Yes,
penny of both benefits, for concurrent receipt. But it didn't used to be that way. It used to, there was an offset. So they had to actually verify the exact amount somebody received in retirement pay, so that they could deduct the right amount in compensation. So there was no overpayment in the retirement pay, and you didn't want to get in all that mess. It's pretty much an exercise in futility these days, but they still do it. I don't know if they're going to continue doing it, but that's basically how it's done. So take that same case and say that veteran died before his claim was done, and the veteran's widow comes in and files a DIC, and accrued benefits claim, and they
wait a minute,
grant
before you go, DIC means she's a widow and she's entitled to dependent benefits. Accrued is the case you're talking about, that there was a pending claim for the veteran at the time of his death, just so everybody knows.
right, right. So DIC is the widow's benefit if the death was service related. All right. She get that rest of her life in most circumstances. The accrued is what's due and owed to the veteran at
Right,
the time of his death. And that includes if that widow had to fight that claim for 1 year, 5 years, 20 years. All
exactly.
right. Whatever it is that would have been paid to the veteran for his life during his lifetime is an accrued benefit to the surviving spouse. All right. So in that scenario, you still have, because it's what would have been paid to the veteran is now being paid to the surviving spouse. If that veteran was a retiree in the examples we're using, then you still have a situation where there's retirement pay and disability compensation that VA typically would offset, okay, until DFAS verifies the retirement pay and lets VA know so they can release all the funds that they withheld.
Okay, so this is something, same thing, that before the VA pays out, they send this to DFAST and say, make sure we're not overpaying, and then once you tell us, we'll pay.
Yeah.
That's normally what should happen.
And so for years, I've been seeing these accrued benefit claims where that process is followed. Now, it's not followed in all of them. Further, and we know now there are reasons for that. Uh, but that process is followed. They withhold back pay from the widow, and then all of a sudden, nothing happens. And 6 months
Right.
goes by, 2 years goes by. VA's never returned those funds to the widow, or the widower, once they were withheld. And we kept trying to find out what's going on here. Why isn't DFAS sending the auditory worksheet into VA so that they can complete this transaction and get the widow the benefits? Someone's dropping the ball. Either it never got to DFAS, DFAS is just ignoring it, Then I found out a couple of months back that wait, DFAS doesn't do these
Surprise, surprise.
processing of widows claims. So wait, that's weird, because there is retirement pay there from the vet. So why wouldn't they do it for widows just like they do it for live vets? Well, apparently, and I spoke to DFAS yesterday on this. DFAS believes that the widows not do those concurrent benefits. Now that is categorically false. Right? VA believes the widow is do
Right,
those benefits. So there's a disagreement going on between VA and DoD. The law is clear. If you're a retiree and you're rated over 50%, you get concurrent receipt. That applies to widows in accrued claims just like it applies to veterans in live claims, period.
right.
Well, if DFAS's position is we're not going to process them and VA has withheld those funds, it vanishes. It goes into a black hole. And that widow, unless somebody's there to help her, or she knows how to do it herself, or he knows how to do it, those benefits may just disappear.
So what do
Okay?
you recommend, Kerry?
And so what we found out for sure is that DFAS's position is they don't do those. Now there are some exceptions we don't need to get into, but for the most part, DFAS does not process those. So the correct way VA should be processing them is not to do a withholding. When they process an accrued benefit, since they know, at least some people in VA know, DFAS is not going to do anything, VA should not withhold any benefits because of the veteran's retirement pay.
So do we write a letter to the VA and say that?
Apparently they know it in central office. But yeah, we're going to be writing a few things. um,
All right, so this is a
and so
standby because Kerry's going to tell you what's going to work.
so if you're a surviving spouse of a retiree and you've got a accrued benefits claim decision where VA has withheld certain amount of that back pay and you haven't received it, this could be why. Okay, now obviously we're talking to a minority of people here, but for that minority, this is a big deal. All right, and so if you haven't received it, I would say contact us, contact somebody, but it's not accurate if VA never gave you those funds that they initially withheld. What we're trying to find out now from VA is what is their position on these claims. Should VA be withholding the retirement pay or the funds because of the retirement pay, or should they not be? Now, the answer to me is clear. They should not be. If they know
Right.
DFAS is not going to process it and they withhold it and then it just vanishes, one, where's the money going? Uh,
Yes.
and how do we get it back to the widow? If they don't withhold, then the widow just gets all the accrued retro as she should,
Good.
and
Right.
then she goes forward and everything's fine. And we see a lot of them where they don't withhold, but there are ones that they do, and the ones that they do seem to vanish. I don't know how widespread it is yet. That's one thing we're going to be trying to find out from VA. They don't know this yet. If they're watching, they might. So you will be getting a FOIA
You
request
will hear from Kerry.
from you on me on this subject because I'd like to know: are we talking about a couple thousand widows, 10,000 widows, 100,000 widows?
Yes.
What is it? We know the numbers there. We've got active cases where this very thing has happened. Um, we just don't know how widespread it is.
Right.
Obviously, it's only going to affect surviving spouses of military retirees. That could also include retirees from the Guard and Reserve, okay, because they get
Right.
concurrent receipt too. Um, that's it. If you know of somebody in that situation, you know of a surviving spouse in that situation, um, we really like to know about it.
Right. So if you
I,
call in, make sure you know this is a special segment that Kerry is really trying to help and to make sure the VA is aware of the problem. So if this fits you, please let him know. And we are here because we want to share, we want to help, but we're asking you to do the same thing. You know, widows, you know, people that are in need that we don't know, and so we're asking you to spread the word. Okay. And talking about spreading the word, I know people want their questions answered, and I want to do that. But I also want to make sure that we let you know important things that have happened recently. And two important things are these studies that have come out. I often get veterans who think they're blue water, think that they were in the territorial water of Vietnam, and they're not. And therefore, even though they were close, they're not going to get the presumptive disabilities, many of them cancers. There was a research program, a medical evaluation that was done by the Department of Defense that came out. It's called Study on the Incidence of Cancer Diagnosis and Mortality Among Military Aviators and Aviator Support. And we're posting that on our website because so many people out there in those carriers, that's what they were working on. Okay. And it shows that if you were in that group, both an aviator and aviator mechanic, you're working as a support, you have a much higher chance of getting certain cancers. And we're going to have this so that you can look at it. This study was done by the government. Okay. So this is the thing I'm talking about. Don't keep beating on a stick that's not going to help you. If you're not within the territorial water of the Vietnam, let's try this, because most of the cases I see are for that. There's another that just came out that's called single and repeated high-level blasts. And those are for people that were around any kind of blast, particularly over in the Gulf. That was terrible, all the blasts that they were exposed to. And they show in this study, which is also one of the largest studies of service people, that they are very likely to have developed not only hearing loss, but PTSD and depression. There are other things on there that they are looking into that also may have been caused or may have a connection. This is an ongoing study. So I encourage you to look at these studies and see if it applies to your case and helps you win your claim, and share it with everybody. Okay, Nate, what's our next question? Oh, we're close to the end. Nate left. We have to feel sorry for Nate.
We're on our own.
Yeah, we're on our own. Poor Nate. Nate was sitting in his house Friday night, just minding his own business, when someone drove through the kitchen. And so Nate's not had a good week. We're sorry, Nate.
And he's still here doing his job. That's amazing.
Yeah. 100% PT, permanent and total. How do I go about getting a wheelchair if the VA is not helping? Well, first of all, if it's related, if you're service connected, that should be really easy. If it's not, I always say, I go to the head of the VA, whoever is it, the director, whoever it is, and I insist on having an appointment with them. They're probably not going to want to give you one. And so they're going to let their little aide talk to you to see if they can make you happy and go away. That's the very first thing I would do. And a lot of times that works. You need to go to a person who can make the decision to give you what you want. If you're staying at the lower level where the clerk doesn't have any ability to do anything, you're not going to get anywhere. So that's my recommendation. You got anything, Kerry? I'm really good at being a thorn in someone's side.
Well, I think it's sort of a healthcare question.
Yeah. Well, that's what I meant at the health.
Well, your primary care physician should be the one to help you get a wheelchair if you need one.
Right.
And they would do that through prosthetics. They're the ones that, unless it's changed since, but I'm pretty sure it's not. Prosthetics would end up issuing the wheelchair. But understand that this is a medical determination, kind of, maybe not as, it's not in the same ballpark, but kind of like, should you take Motrin or should you take aspirin? And the reason I say that is because there are certain things that are not appealable to anywhere. Okay. And a true healthcare determination is one of those things. VA likes to shield things under that sort of clause if they can get away with it. They tried shielding the caregiver program under that. They tried to say that's a healthcare determination and you cannot appeal it. They are right only halfway. It's not a healthcare determination. It's clearly a benefit. But two healthcare determinations are not appealable when they are made in the proper context, like you need Motrin, not aspirin. Same thing here. The doctor says you don't need a wheelchair. You might literally be facing a situation where VA is not going to help you, and you might not be able to appeal it, except maybe locally, internally at that VA healthcare center. That usually doesn't happen. I mean, if you need the wheelchair, most primary care physicians are going to help you get one. I'm only saying that just to let you know it's not something you can appeal to the board, unfortunately.
Yeah, I wasn't talking about that, Kerry. And I was
Yeah,
just assuming that this veteran did need that wheelchair.
yeah,
If you have a primary care who won't help you, I suggest you get another primary care as well.
yeah, yeah. If you need a wheelchair and they won't give you one,
Right.
that I mean, if you can walk or not, walk effectively. Um, they should be giving you one. I
And
would.
some of these people on that are saying, they're saying the DAV chapters might help you with the wheelchair. I don't know anything about that, but that's certainly someone to contact. But the VA, if you need one, should be giving you one.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Their prosthetics department. I mean, they give them out left and right. For the most part, or you could just bypass the wheelchair and get a scooter if that's even better for you. But
Right.
if they're saying you don't need one and you can barely walk, I go to the patient advocate or somebody, but change providers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a C&P exam, that's compensation and pension, scheduled for my unemployability claim. Any suggestions or advice? Yes. When you are talking about why you can't work, you need to make sure you relate it to a service connected problem. Don't complain about things that aren't service connected because that's a sure denial. And you need to show them how you can't work both mentally and physically most of the time. Kerry, any advice?
No, I think that's because they'll come back and say even if you can't work physically, or you can do sedentary work. So something to think about. If you can't do sedentary work, then make sure that comes out if somehow if you get a chance during the examination.
And before any compensation and pension exam, please download the form that the person who's going to evaluate you is going to complete. So there's a form on there, unemployability, that they're going to be completing. So you need to know what questions you're going to be asked or should be asked, and you'll know what things might be important to bring up if they don't ask you that. And then, of course,
Well,
you'll go ahead, Kerry.
well, I would add now one big thing I would add is if you're service connected for multiple conditions and you put on your 8940 for your application for TDIU that your TDIU is due from all service connected conditions, then expect to be examined for all your service connected conditions. All right. I'm not saying that's a bad way to do it. Sometimes that's the only way to do it, but sometimes only one condition or two conditions is causing the TDIU. Then you would just put those conditions. But my point is this: whatever you put, be prepared to go through an examination for that disability. Okay. And so that means going back to the guy that's 40% for a back, you put in for TDIU, you might get a back exam.
Right.
Uh, uh, you know, and so just things to think about. So you don't want to go in there thinking only employment. If you're service connected for PTSD at 70%, and that is your only service connected condition, and it's causing you to be unemployed, by all means, file for TDIU. Okay, but your examination is most likely going to be a mental health exam, not one that's solely based around just whether you can work or not. And
Right.
so you want to go into that thinking, here's my answers about how I can work, but don't forget they're probably going to examine the things that you're service connected for. So you want to be prepared for that as well.
Right.
So
So you want to get the forms for all of those. And as I tell you, VA has amnesia. Just because you had PTSD for the last 20 years doesn't mean you have it now. So you need to get the form for PTSD. On page 4, it starts criteria. And if you don't have something in each one of those little boxes, then you don't have PTSD under the VA's guidelines. So whatever you're asking for, make sure you've got those forms and you know the answers to the questions. One more. What is TDIU? Total disability due to unemployability. There's two ways to get 100%. One, if your rating or combined ratings meet 100%, that's a scheduler. Or if you don't meet that, but a service-connected problem keeps you from working and you're not working, they have to evaluate you. If you have a rating of at least 60% for one thing, a combined rating of 70 with 140% at least. Okay, there's a little more to that to understand, but that's what TDIU, it's an alternative way to get 100% for people who are not working. And it's usually the easiest and best way rather than a scheduler 100%. Kerry, it's been wonderful as usual. I'm going to have to get Ponton done like that, I think. Can you help me?
I'm not even sure where I got that thing, to be honest.
All right. Y'all have a
My
great
my
week.
favorite, though, is I don't know if you can see it, the Life magazine.
Yes, that's
Right, that's
wonderful.
my favorite. That's an actual 1962 version of Life magazine, and
Wow.
those were a couple of vets had dug in there in Vietnam that were pretty wounded. It's still got the little tag on who it was mailed to and all that. I've had that for about 25 years now.
It's really moving too. All right. Thank you for your service. Have a great week, and we'll see you next week.